Welcome back. We're still experimenting with my bread recipe. In this one, we're going to up our soft white to 1.5 cups. If you're curious as to why we're using soft wheat, check the pinned comment below, and while you're there, tell me what you're baking this week. Let's get baking. In this recipe, remember, we're going to use 1.5 cups of hard red wheat and 1.5 cups of soft white wheat. So once I measured both of my wheats out, I went ahead and poured them both into my Como mill. Now I do this because as it mills, it's going to mix those two different wheat berries together. Now I buy my wheat berries in 5-gallon buckets, which holds roughly 42 pounds of wheat berries. And having that amount will allow me to mill and make bread for about 6 months for my family. Remember, I have the Como, so my Como doesn't have a container that the flour goes into like the Nutrimill does, so I have to rotate my bowl to control the mound sizes. After we mill, we're going to go ahead and put in 1.5 cups of hot water, 1/3 cup of oil, and 1/3 cup of honey. Now my bread machine tells me to go ahead and put all the wet ingredients in first. Not all bread machines do that. Some tell you to go ahead and put the dry ingredients in first and then the wet ingredients, but please remember to always put the yeast in last. After I add my honey in, I'm going to add my egg. Now the egg is optional, you don't have to have it in my recipe. Once I add my egg in, I'm going to add in 2 teaspoons of Himalayan salt. You don't have to use Himalayan salt. I like Himalayan salt because it actually has a richer mineral content than regular old table salt. But you can use table salt if that's what you have on hand. After I add my salt, I'm going to add in the sunflower lecithin. Now remember, this helps soften the bread like store-bought bread that a lot of people prefer the texture of. So we're going to add 1 tablespoon of it in. Now after the sunflower lecithin, we're going to go ahead and add in our freshly milled wheat. And then afterwards, I'm going to create kind of like a little bowl or crater in my flour for the yeast to go into. I don't recommend sprinkling your yeast over your flour because you don't want your yeast to be activated by the wet ingredients too soon. That's why I do a crater or a bowl and put my yeast into it. Now after we add our yeast to our dry ingredients on top, because it's the last thing that we do, we're going to go ahead and put it into our bread machine. Now when you put it in your bread machine, make sure that it locks in. Otherwise the paddle or paddles won't be able to mix all of your ingredients together and knead your dough correctly. Now mine is on a homemade function, so I tell it exactly how long it's going to rest, knead, bake, and so forth, and it also tells me about when it will be done. Afterwards, I'm going to go ahead and clean up and move all of my containers with my wheat berries away, and here you can see my son helping me do that. He likes to push things around. He's trying to learn how to walk and have that confidence, so he's helping me clean up. Once your bread is done, you want to go ahead and pull that container out and be careful because it is hot. And I always go ahead and dump it out onto a cooling rack. Now, I have learned with my experience to not just go ahead and flip it upside down and dump it because the top then will get pushed in and it will kind of sort of deflate. So I always dump it out on the side and then pick it up and rotate it so it's standing up again. Here is our finished product. The bread looks very airy, that you can tell from the bubbles that you can see on the top of the crust, and it did raise nicely. All right, our bread is done baking. So far, it looks pretty much the same as it always does. It has not fallen, and we're going to cut it open and see what the texture is on the inside, and then also we're going to do a taste test. All right. Nice and soft and full on the inside. Now let's taste it. Hey babe, you want to come try this?
Always.
It's still soft.
Yeah.
It's soft like store-bought still.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the flavor?
I think the flavor is good, and the crust has changed a little bit. I don't know if you've noticed that. It actually got a little harder and flakier around on the crust. This has gotten a lot closer to store-bought, which I know that you are reducing some of the protein that's in this while you're doing these experiments, right?
Mm-hmm.
But overall, you still got a lot of protein and vitamins and minerals and all that other stuff, though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It doesn't. The crust, I would say, is more firm, like the stuff you get from the bakery.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, it's the store-bought stuff like Wonder Bread and what is it, Sunbeam and so forth. The crust is a little bit more softer, kind of like the last one that we did. This one is more like what you would get in a bakery, I would say.
Yeah, but it definitely has a really good flavor. It's still held together really well. So with the shortage that we're having on the hard white, I think you may have found a really good way to be able to replace it here. I think that the kids would really like this too, but they're already in bed.
Whoops. If you guys have anything that you want me to try with my bread recipe, leave a comment below and let me know.